So, Bridgerton Season 3. With the release of Season 3 Part 2, it currently has mixed reviews by fans alike, including myself, with many feeling as if the show didn't feel like the earlier seasons of Bridgerton. From what felt like a rushed season to 2 characters getting married in one season, I'm Lauren, and today we are going to talk about the issues Bridgerton Season 3 had, as well as how different it felt watching it, especially as this is one of the shows keeping Netflix alive. Showrunner and changes. Bridgerton currently has a new showrunner that took over for Season 3, as Chris Van Dusen, who did Season 1 and 2, had stepped down. Jess Brownell took over as showrunner, and the difference between Season 1 and 2 versus Season 3 seems very prevalent. For example, in the first 2 seasons, the main Bridgerton character and their love interest was at the forefront of the season. For example, Daphne and Simon, and Kate and Anthony. Yes, there were side stories like Marina's and Antony's in Season 1 and Benedict's and Eloise in Season 2. However, in Season 3, fans, including myself, noticed a very heavy amount of side stories that were incorporated into this season. Here is a list of all the side stories in Season 3. Antony and Kate's brief time together and mentioning them being with child, Philippa and Prudence attempting to have a son to be the Featherington heir, Francesca's debut and love match with John, Violet and Lady Danbury's brother, Cressida and Lady Whistledown, the Monrich storyline, and Benedict's storyline. Personally, I felt as if all these storylines took away from Colin and Penelope's main romance. If you ask me, the storylines that probably would have been fine to keep would be the Featheringtons trying to have a male heir, as that ties into Colin and Penelope's son, and Cressida and Lady Whistledown, as that actually happens in the book. Francesca, to me, should have had her own season, but I get why they might have sped this up for both her and Colin to share this season. So I speculate that either Benedict and Eloise might share a season in Season 4 as well as with Francesca, or it might just be Benedict and Francesca. But even then, that feels like too much. Also, Part 1 and Part 2 felt drastically different from each other, as Part 2 felt more rushed, but that's just me. Now, the Monrich side story is probably the most disliked side story by fans, which I'm kind of getting the vibe that this may be because of a borderline race issue that some Bridgerton fans have. Personally, it was nice to see them in society, and I personally think that their son might be a love interest to Hyacinth, yet because of all the side stories, I personally found theirs a little boring, but like mentioned, it might be relevant in the future. And Benedict and his whorehouse, excuse my language, could have been rather explored, I think, in his own season. I like how he's exploring his sexuality a bit more, especially since we saw somewhat of a foreshadow to it in Season 2, but it could have been incorporated in his own season, which Season 4 is alluding to be his season due to a mention of a masquerade ball. I also didn't like how they got rid of him being into art, as that seemed to be a very big plot point to him in Season 1 and 2. I don't remember Season 1, but I remember Season 2, but that's just me. Many might say that this season had the same amount of storylines as the last 2. However, if that's the case, it felt more rushed and didn't flow as better as the other 2 seasons, as well as still being able to show the main couple. So here are some underlying problems I noticed. So some fans are also upset at the change of one of Francesca's male love interests, Michael, who in the books is the cousin of her husband John, and she marries Michael after John's death. At the end of Season 3, we find out that Michael is changed to Michaela, which will give Francesca a change in her storyline as she will marry a woman after John's death. Personally, I have no problem with the gender change, etc. I just think it was a little too soon to introduce Michaela. Francesca and John just got married and had literally one kiss, and suddenly we're gonna throw the whole romance between them away? I think we could have waited for Francesca and Michaela to meet after John's death, just like how it is in the book, so we can also see how both the romances with John and Michaela would form. She could still have her 2 love stories, but with adequate time for both of them to flourish. A lot of fans were saddened by the change, mainly because Francesca was someone that women who struggle with fertility issues could relate to, as well as how Jess Brownell, the showrunner, had made a comment about how there's no LGBTQ+ representation in Bridgerton. Personally, I would disagree with that, as we got Brimsley and the other guy, I'm so sorry I forgot his name, who were together in Queen Charlotte, and now we have Benedict, so I don't know if she means female representation in particular, which is most likely what she means. just told Teen Vogue the following: "My approach to telling a gay story on Bridgerton has been to look to the books for thematic cues. I didn't want to just insert a gay character for gay character's sake. I wanted to tell a story that accurately reflects an LGBTQ+ experience. And the first time I read Francesca's book, I really identified with it as an LGBTQ+ woman." This quote in particular had fans accusing Jess of making Francesca somewhat of a self-insert to reflect herself, which, to be honest, I find that so crazy. But considering that Francesca's storyline kind of shadowed Penelope's, as well as it's still going to get focused on in Benedict's season, I just find it a little crazy to assume that, but if it's kind of true, then that's insane to say the least. Now, some fans are a little too mad about this by saying, "Oh, Francesca's story is being changed, I want Michael, etc." Yet some fans, or some of those same fans, were rooting for Eloise and Cressida to become a couple, as well as Benedict being bisexual and kissing a guy. Mind you, everyone I just mentioned is either white or light complected. So it's okay for characters to be gay if their counterpart is white just like them?
Oh, okay.
The reason why I'm bringing up how race may be a reason as to why people might not want Michael to be changed to Michaela is because this would not be the first time people send hate to a non-white character in Bridgerton. Ruby Barker and Regé-Jean Page, the actors who play Marina and Simon, received heavy racist backlash for their characters compared to that of their white counterpart characters when they got cast. According to Rolling Stone, Ruby Barker spoke out about how Netflix treated her when she had psychotic breaks on the show, saying the following: "Not a single person from Netflix, not a single person from Shondaland, since I have had 2 psychotic breaks from that show, have even contacted me or even emailed me to ask if I'm okay or if I would benefit from any sort of aftercare or support. Nobody." Some of the fandom will also excuse actions that some of the characters do, while other characters who do the same exact thing get hated on. For example, fans will hate Marina for trapping Colin and doing what's best for her child, while loving Portia, who encouraged her girls to do that and is doing what is best for her girls. Regé also gets a lot of hate from fans who want him to come back to Bridgerton, yet those same fans push the narrative that he left because he didn't want to be solely known for Bridgerton. It was speculated that Regé got paid less, even though he was the main male love interest in the show during season 1. So most likely that and the toxic work environment may have been the reason for his departure.
Not the first person to say this, definitely not the right person to say this, but it is becoming very apparent to me with season 3 coming out just how racist a lot of the Bridgerton fandom is and how much racism is going pretty much completely unchecked in the discussions about it. I'm not a Bridgerton stan. I got dragged into ship wars unintentionally one day on Twitter and it was horrific and I have no desire to wade into that again. But even excluding the really blatant racism that gets brought up and pretty quickly denounced by people, like how people were talking about John's actor, saying they wish they'd cast someone more attractive and then just a bunch of white and light-skinned actors, that I feel like I see get called out a little bit more, although that's clearly still a big chunk of the fandom. But there is some really common things people talk about that I think show a really clear underlying bias and racism that don't seem to get any kind of pushback and that most of the fandom seems to not even realize the implications of. And this is most obvious in how I see people talking about the character of Marina, played by Ruby Barker, and the actor Regé-Jean Page. Now, both these actors have spoken out about the fact they got really strong racist backlash when they were cast in Bridgerton and when the show came out from people who were saying they shouldn't have been cast in a period drama, who are really upset about their casting. And Ruby Barker spoke about how Netflix basically abandoned her. It completely tanked her mental health and she felt she was not supported whatsoever. It's really harrowing to read. And Regé-Jean Page, I think, shared that post, but he shared a post also talking about how it was shameful that big studios don't support their actors through this. And it was pretty clear the implication was that Netflix also didn't support him. And he bore a huge chunk of this backlash. So keeping that in mind, how weird is it that it has become a common joke that he left the show because he was too big for his britches and now he isn't working? How is that in any way a reflection of him? So even ignoring the fact that as far as I can tell he left because they were not going to pay him very much considering he was the lead of the show, Even ignoring that, which was the stated reason, not that he was on to bigger and better things, which again feels like a projection. But anyway, even ignoring that, him leaving a show that left him out to the wolves when he was the victim of a hate campaign, that is a fair thing. Even if there was no other reason, even if that was the only thing, he would still be entirely justified in that, and it should be on Netflix to earn back his trust. And yet, I see no jokes about how Netflix fumbled this guy who was a huge part of why the show became popular. Instead, it's constant jokes about the fact that this guy left because he was uppity or whatever. It's very strange that people are fixating on this and no one making these jokes is aware or cares about the fact that a huge part of why he left was probably racism. And for Marina's character, so much of the discourse, at first I thought it was just like misogyny, because obviously I've got blind spots, but the more I see of it, the more I am convinced that there's a huge layer of misogynoir to the way that people talk about the character of Marina, especially how like Pollen stans talk about her, the way people so gleefully talk about her like life being ruined essentially out of jealousy, not actually out of real concern for anyone's well-being. The way people talk about her as this like villainous slut who like deserved everything that came to her when she was like a single mother trying to secure her child's future in a desperate situation, and who had her life like essentially ruined, especially as far as I can tell in the books. She ends up like, because of this, like, people talk about that as being justified in a way I truly, truly do not believe they would talk about that plot point if the actresses were reversed. And I'm sure if this was pointed out to the people saying these things, they would deny. I'm sure it's not like blatant, intentional racism on their part, but there's clearly so many biases going completely unchecked by the people in this fandom, and it is adding up, and it is clearly a pattern. And it's very worrying how little pushback I see from, like, other Bridgerton fans. I definitely see people talking about it, but within the fandom, from what I can see of these posts I'm, like, getting recommended from the comment sections on TikTok, like, so much of this stuff is going just completely unchecked within the people watching and making stan accounts about this show. And it's very worrying, especially about a show with such a large black cast. Like, these actors we know are being left out to the wolves by Netflix, not given any kind of support. And on top of that, even from people who are supposedly supporting the show, there's this constant, like, microaggression. Like, they're not being protected by anyone, not by the studios, not by the fans, not by the general public. It's... I don't know what to say. Like I said, I'm not the right person. It's very weird. It's getting so weird.
Overall, if fans want Michaela to be back to their original form of Michael, that could somewhat be a preference, but I think some fans took it a little too far. So the biggest problem that many people had was the shadowing of the main female character, Penelope. So many of you might already know this, but supposedly there was a lot of cutscenes from season 3 of Penelope and Colin. Those scenes include the following: Colin going home with Penelope after he finds her at the Modiste, leading to an angry kissing scene, Pollen laying in bed together talking about publishing Colin's manuscripts for his book, Colin whispering sweet nothings to Pen in front of the mirror, kissing her neck and being playful, and lastly, a long intimate montage in episode 8. Now, before the season dropped, a post went viral amongst fans in which it showed a playlist of songs that were going to be featured this season. The only song that seemed to have not made it into the show was I Wanna Be Yours by the Arctic Monkeys. Many fans, including myself, speculate that the song was going to be featured in one of the deleted scenes, more specifically, the montage in episode 8. Season 3 was also pushed as the spiciest season of Bridgerton by Nicola and Luke, the two actors who play Penelope and Colin, especially since this was going to be their season. Yet they were the ones who supposedly had the most cut scenes, to the point where a whole petition has been made to have Netflix release the scenes. I think it's over like 50,000. I'm not sure. That's crazy, to be honest. And also to mention that with all the side stories in this season, it took away from Penelope and Colin's season. So for example, Francesca and Penelope both got married in this season, and Francesca was named as the diamond of the season. Not to also mention, in part 1, there was a total of 33 minutes of Penelope and Colin scenes out of 3 hours and 25 minutes of part 1. Fans also speculated that there could have possibly been a deeper reason as to why Colin and Penelope's time together was cut short, with many speculating that it could have been that Penelope is not the quote-unquote ideal woman under the showrunner's eyes.
So I picked the Pitbull cover, and before the season...
Skinny women will never allow bigger girls to shine. Take Bridgerton as your ultimate proof of this. She possibly ruined her own career because she couldn't visually imagine that a fat bitch could even be loved by someone like Colin. Like, we can play around it all we want. The reason why Penelope or Nicola is not portrayed in a light where she is loved openly, fervently, and truly, it's because the showrunner, who's supposed to be the visionary, who's supposed to be in her shoes, to imagine, to bring the feelings to life, couldn't imagine it herself. Why? Because she doesn't want to be fat. She doesn't believe skinny bitches deserve to be loved. So why the fuck would she give us anything that would resemble love? I am so done with Bridgerton. I'm so done with the show. They can keep it. I'm done, because the one person that represents the majority of how women look, because the majority of women are not size zeros, size twos, like Daphne or Kate. But we put up with it. We watched Bridgerton. We watched them. We celebrate them. We wanted them to be, but she couldn't. And that is the difference. And y'all not about to gaslight me and tell me that's not the truth. The reason why she could not highlight Penelope's love story is because she can't imagine Penelope being loved as a fat woman. Here's another hot take. Jess Brownwell exemplify what I believe is people who only believe in representation when they are being represented. I've now watched a couple of her interviews, and she couldn't give a fuck about what Penelope meant to the girls. Like, she couldn't give a fuck because she couldn't see herself in it. While she's talking about representation and how it's needed and yada, 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 yada. Shut the fuck up. And that's why, I hate how commercialized intersectionality in feminism has become, because it's people who use feminist language, who use these ideologies to promote themselves, to prop themselves up, while not actually giving a damn about the rest of anyone else. Because what do you mean you didn't see the value of highlighting Penelope's story? Why? Because you can't relate to her? Because you can't see yourself in her? Because you just can't, you just don't care enough, it's... What's the issue? It's not a big of a deal. You didn't give a fuck because you don't respect what Penelope meant to a lot of women. And that, you got, I just... Count your days, Jess.
This is going to be the hottest take I'll ever make concerning Bridgerton. I don't even know if I'll keep this video up, to be honest. Okay, but I wanted to just say this. Representation is good. It's a good first step. but the execution of the representation is everything. Here's what I mean. Shonda having these beautiful black characters replace the traditional white characters that are portrayed in the book is great, except a lot of them, with the exception of Lady Danbury and Queen Charlotte, are portrayed as like not likable and don't really have a great character development on the show. Simon was hot, yes, but he was a douchebag. Marina was beautiful, but she was done so dirty. It was awful. And John hasn't even been married for a year and his wife is already looking at somebody else. Michaela's coming into the picture already hated because she's not Michael. Race aside, let's talk body size. Medium-sized girly, I wanted to see Penelope front and center as a leading lady. She was sidelined for skinnier other characters to be brought out in the front more than she ever was. Her scenes were cut. Most of her spicy scenes were cut. Why is that? Why the lack of representation there? And I know that they'll say, oh, well, she is being represented. Not well. So just to bring my point home, with them going this queer direction, who's to say that they're actually going to execute that representation well? Because if we look at the track record, it's not looking good. So I'm going to go back to my books, imagine the characters that I want to imagine in my head, and I'm going to be just fine.
I don't know, y'all. I personally found it a little weird how most of the supposed cutscenes were of the main love season, yet Jess Brownwell is over here saying representation, but diminishing scenes that show intimacy, not necessarily a physical intimacy, but emotional or romantic, with a plus-size woman. So, I don't know, just make it make sense, right? Update, so apparently the cutscenes have been rumored to be fake due to a screenshot from the comment section of a TikTok that reads, "Can we please get an extended version of episode 8 with Pauline's sex montage?" And one of the directors responded saying myth, so it may be fake, or maybe this could just be them saying that they want to die it down and try to say it's fake even though it could be true. I don't know. But all I have to say is that is embarrassing to refer to the romance scenes as a sex montage. Like, Pookie Bear, just go back to book talk at that point. Okay, so overall, this was my rant and my take on Bridgerton Season 3 and the issues I personally found with it, as well as what I noticed that other people had. So I'd like to hear what you all think about this down below, and let me know what you all thought about Season 3 if you watched it. So make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Comment down below what else you guys want me to talk about. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time on my channel. Bye, guys.